Washington, concerned that the missile defense system designed to protect American cities is insufficient by itself to deter a North Korean attack, the Trump administration is expanding its strategy to also try to stop Pyongyang's missiles before they get far from Korean airspace. The new approach, hinted at in an emergency request to Congress last week for $4 billion to deal with North Korea, envisions the stepped-up use of cyberweapons to interfere with the North's control systems before missiles are launched, as well as drones and fighter jets to shoot them down moments after liftoff. The missile defense network on the West Coast would be expanded for use if everything else fails. In interviews, defense officials, along with top scientists and senior members of Congress, described the accelerated effort as a response to the unexpected progress that North Korea has made in developing intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of delivering a nuclear bomb to the continental United States. "It is an all-out effort," said Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, who returned from a lengthy visit to South Korea last month, convinced that the United States needed to do far more to counter North Korea. "There is a fast emerging threat, a diminishing window, and a recognition that we can't be reliant on one solution. For years, that single solution has been the missile batteries in Alaska and California that would target any long-range warheads fired toward the American mainland, trying to shoot them down as they re-enter the atmosphere. Such an approach, known as hitting a bullet with a bullet, remains of dubious effectiveness, even after more than $100 billion has been spent on the effort. Anti-missile batteries on ships off the Korean coast and in South Korea protect against medium-range missiles, but not those aimed at American cities. Washington is responding to the North Korean nuclear threat with a rush of money to strengthen old anti-missile systems and inaugurate new ones." The diagram shows a mix of current and proposed options for defeating the North's long-range missiles. Fort Greely, Alaska ground-based interceptors, intercontinental ballistic missile Vandenberg, Caliph. Ground-based interceptors Fort Greely, Alaska ground-based interceptors Vandenberg, Caliph. Ground-based interceptors attacks on infrastructure, industrial sabotage to cripple missile, cyber and electronic strikes to interfere with launch and guidance systems, missile strikes on launching pad, attacks on rising missiles, fighter jets firing air-to-air missiles, drones firing laser beams, drones firing air-to-air missiles. 3. During the mid-course phase, attacks on incoming warheads, increasing the number of interceptor rockets to as many as 104 from 44, equipping interceptor rockets with improved kill vehicles that are meant to destroy enemy warheads by force of impact. So the administration plans to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into the two other approaches, both of which are still in the experimental stage. The first involves stepped-up cyberattacks and other sabotage that would interfere with missile launches before they occur, what the Pentagon calls left of launch. The second is a new approach to blowing up the missiles in the boost phase, when they are slow-moving, highly visible targets. President Trump has praised the existing missile defense system, insisting last month that it can knock out a missile in the air 97% of the time, a claim that arms control experts call patently false. In trial runs, conducted under ideal conditions, the interceptors in Alaska and California have failed half of the time. And the Pentagon has warned administration officials that the North will soon have enough long-range missiles to launch volleys of them, including decoys, making the problem far more complex. That helps explain the rush for new protections. "They're looking at everything," said Thomas Caraco, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, who recently led two anti-missile studies and closely monitors the administration's planning. "What you're seeing is a lot more options on the table. The $4 billion emergency budget sought by the White House is on top of the $8 billion that the Missile Defense Agency has already been granted for this fiscal year, as well as what other military services and agencies are putting into missile defense. Another $440 million was moved from existing programs to anti-missile work 2 months ago, as the North Korea threat became more serious." In the emergency request to Congress, and in documents made public by its committees, the precise use of the funds is cloaked in deliberately vague language. Hundreds of millions of dollars, for example, are allotted for what the documents called disruption defeat efforts. Several officials confirmed that the disruption efforts include another, more sophisticated attempt at the kind of cyber and electronic strikes that President Barack Obama ordered in 2014 when he intensified his efforts to cripple North Korea's missile testing. Using cyberweapons to disrupt launches is a radical innovation in missile defense in the past 3 decades. But in the case of North Korea, it is also the most difficult. It requires getting into the missile manufacturing, launch control and guidance systems of a country that makes very limited use of the internet and has few connections to the outside world, most of them through China, and to a lesser degree Russia. In the operation that began in 2014, a range of cyber and electronic interference operations were used against the North's Musudan intermediate-range missiles, in an effort to slow its testing. But that secret effort had mixed results. The failure rate for the Musudan missile soared to 88%, but it was never clear how much of that was due to the cyberattacks and how much to sabotage of the North's supply chain and its own manufacturing errors. Then Kim Jong-un, the country's president, ordered a change in design, and the test launches have been far more successful. The experience has raised difficult questions about the effectiveness of cyberweapons, despite billions of dollars in investment. "We can dream of a lot of targets too," said Michael Sulmeyer, director of the Cybersecurity Project at Harvard and formerly the director for cyber policy planning and operations in the Office of the Defense Secretary. "But it can be hard to achieve the effects we want when we want them." Congressional documents also talk of making additional investments in boost phase missile defense. The goal of that approach is to hit long-range missiles at their point of greatest vulnerability, while their engines are firing and the vehicles are stressed to the breaking point, and before their warheads are deployed. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis is also weighing, among other boost phase plans, formulas that draw on existing technologies and could be deployed quickly. The Avenger drone, made by General Atomics, has a wingspan of 76 feet and would potentially be used to shoot North Korean missiles as they are launched. General Atomics' one idea is having stealth fighters such as the F-22 or the F-35 scramble from nearby bases in South Korea and Japan at the first sign of North Korean launch preparations. The jets would carry conventional air-to-air missiles, which are 12 feet long, and fire them at the North Korean long-range missiles after they are launched. But they would have to fly relatively close to North Korea to do that, increasing the chances of being shot down. A drawback of boost phase defense is the short window to use it. Long-range missiles fire their engines for just 5 minutes or so, in contrast to warheads that zip through space for about 20 minutes before plunging back to Earth. And there is the risk of inviting retaliation from North Korea. You have to make a decision to fire a weapon into somebody's territory. John E. Hayden of the Air Force, commander of the United States Strategic Command, which controls the American nuclear missile fleet, recently told a Washington group. "And if you're wrong, or if you miss, a boost phase idea getting much notice would be to have drones patrol high over the Sea of Japan, awaiting a North Korean launch. Remote operators would fire heat-sensing rockets that lock onto the rising missiles. It's a huge advance," Gerald Jonas, chief scientist for President Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, said of the drone plan. "It's one of those things where you hit yourself on the forehead and say, why didn't I think of that?" Leonard H. Kaveny, a main planner of the rocket-firing drones and a former Navy officer who directed science and technology at the Pentagon's anti-missile program from 1985 to 1997, said an accelerated program could produce the weapons in a year or less. Dr. Kaveny's team is considering use of the Avenger, a drone made by General Atomics that has a wingspan of 76 feet. "This is going to be a game-changer," said Arthur L. Herman, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute in Washington, who collaborates with Dr. Kaveny. The Pentagon's Missile Defense Agency is also developing a drone that would fire potent laser beams at rising missiles. But recent plans would have it make its debut no sooner than 2025, too late to play a role in the current crisis, or the Trump presidency. Even so, the effort has influential backers. In the recent talk, General Hayden of Strategic Command called lasers much better than interceptor rockets because they avoided questions over firing weapons into sovereign territories, especially to knock out missile test flights. "Potent beam of highly concentrated light," he said, "goes out into space, avoiding the trespassing issue." In recent months, Congress has urged Pentagon officials to develop both varieties of drones. Theodore A. Postel, a professor emeritus of science and national security policy at MIT, who has drawn up plans for a missile-firing drone, argued that fleets of such weapons patrolling near the North, threatening to undo its strategic forces, would be extremely intimidating and create new diplomatic leverage. "We need it now," he said. "My concern is that we get something out there quickly that will pressure North Korea to negotiate." A version of this article appears in print on November 17, 2017, on page A1 of the New York edition with the headline "To Counter North Korea Missiles, U.S. is racing for plans B and C."